Call this Topsham Select Board meeting to order on June 15, 2023 from the Donald A. Russell Meeting Room. Would you all please rise? Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, would you call that roll, please?
I will. David
I
Douglas.
am here.
Marie Brilliant. Here. Ruth Byen. Present. Matt Nixon.
Yeah.
Roland Tubbs.
Here.
And our town manager, Derek Skripchansky, is also at the head table.
Thank you, Patty.
Welcome.
Town managers report.
Okay, welcome everyone. Next week, we expect reconstruction to begin staging equipment down for the replacement project of the bridge. I was also informed that MDOT will have a schedule with the upcoming meetings, and we'll also post that on our website as a link. So that's good news. As you can see, paving is underway for the municipal complex. We've done a good job so far. We only had a couple days out of day of rain, but it should be complete by Friday. Go tomorrow afternoon. Also have word that detours for the Market Basket traffic circle, the roundabout, will begin after July 4th to consider the traffic that may happen during that period. So the detours will be on Park Drive and Midway Drive, and Home Depot's been consulted already, and Crooker will maintain those communications with them. Just as a reminder, Town Hall will be closed on Tuesday, June 27th. CMP will be shutting power down to put the relay panel in for the new generator that's being installed. And the July 6th Select Board meeting has been canceled. Just to give a reminder there. And lastly, I would like to introduce our 2023 boat interns who will be spending the summer with Mark and I and each of the departments. And we're excited to have them. And I'll mention names in Karam. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name, so if I mess it up, please let me know. Sky Lahan is with us. Boaz Malikoff. Boaz was actually with us last year, and he had asked to return for a second internship.
Oh, we'll have to mess that up.
Abigail Martin and Karam Sutan. Thank you, Karam. And so we're happy to have them, and I think the last week and a half has been pretty adventurous for them for the most part. And so thanks for being here.
Excellent. Any questions of the manager? Thanks. Any public comment? Anyone have correspondence?
Just this thing, right?
You're not official.
Go ahead, Matt.
I should absolutely talk about this because we all were supposed to have gotten it right.
We got it.
On Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., there will be a public hearing sponsored by the Lower Road Rail Use Advisory Council to determine what to do with the lower road, whether it should be covered over and converted into a path or some other type of construct. So for those of you listening at home, Travis, aren't you here? Yeah. Anyway, for those of you watching this on YouTube, please tune in. The website is available on. On our website.
We can make that available. We'll put it up tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be good. Cool. Thank you.
Any questions of Matt? Nothing. Consent calendar, approval of the minutes of the regular select board meeting, June 1, 2023. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Boom, public hearing. Look at this, right on the, oh, I skipped boards and committee. I am so sorry. Got all excited going into our meeting on. We're gonna jump back to boards committee reports and update, final update on the boat launch, water access grant design, Travis Pryor, project manager. Because you didn't show last time, now you just gotta do it, it's gonna do it to you this time.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. I'm sorry about last time. Thank you for having me back. Good evening. As I'll do a brief introduction again. My name's Travis Pryor. I'm project manager for the Topsham Forsyth Road water access feasibility study. The study was funded with assistance from the Maine coastal program. And you guys have seen an initial draft of the boat launch plans. We got some feedback and looked at 2 ramps versus, or 2 lanes versus single lane opportunities, maybe the dredge for all tides access versus partial tides, and working with existing conditions that are out there. We talked about access routes either off Forsyth Road or through Pinewood neighborhood, and a variety of other site improvements, parking and access drives, and we can put a list kind of a bid alternate costs, cost estimate to address some of those things. The design reflects a lot of feedback that we've heard from you all, and tonight I've highlighted a couple areas where you could add additional boat trailer parking spaces. We showed 5 initially. You could add up to 15, which you might find a little bit more common, I think, at the type of boat facility that you might be looking at for a standard public recreation facility. Somebody, what you have across the river for boat trailer capacity in Brunswick, or some other sites that we're familiar with around the state. And I've updated the cost estimate to have an alternate cost for the additional 10 parking spaces as well too, from the previous one we've done. And then I do have a working draft of our design basis memorandum that talks about the background data and LiDAR contours and tax maps and things like that we use for our basis of design at this level of study. And some of the assumptions we made, some environmental regulations that are either opportunities or constraints on the site. And I'll be getting that out to you as a final draft here to review shortly after this meeting. And after you get your final feedback on the design and cost estimates. And I understand you'd like to maybe talk about next steps in terms of implementation and funding as well too. I've had the great privilege of working with Topsham for close to 2 decades now, and familiar with most of the funding sources that are out there. The Maine Coastal Program has helped fund this initial study and can possibly help with some additional design as next steps. And then the primary funding sources, whether it's the small harbor improvement program through Maine DOT, land and water conservation funds, which are a federal funded program, or the Maine Public Facilities Fund, and your 3 primary funds that help the construction of the projects as well. So in our report, we have we know where those are and some details about them. Next steps, like developing a funding strategy if you for the path you choose to move forward. So I will put the cost estimate. I'm invited here to share screen. The supplemental information that you have is largely, again, the same plans that you've seen before, updated costs. We are at a 30% kind of conceptual planning level, so there's about a 30% contingency in our costs as well too. We try not to be the low bidder. Really rather would be the high bidder at this phase, and have you guys pleasantly surprised when bids come in. It has been a challenging environment for the last few years. From grocery stores to construction, everything's been going up quite a bit. Most people just aren't available. So we hope that we've baked in some of those conservative factors as well too, based on the pricing that we've seen escalating the last few years. Happy to discuss any questions you have about costs as well.
Charles, can you make sure that you cover, that maybe you've done it with the channel armoring, the articulating concrete mat, because that's obviously the largest cost, and I can't even think for the life of me what that means.
It is. So what it is we anticipate if you want to get out to the depth of water in the river where you would have all tides access, and there's boating facility standards that's 3 feet of depth above mean low water, which right now at the bottom of the ramp, right at about mean low water, but you do have tides that go below that, and you have average tides that are kind of right at that level. So in an email, I analyzed tides for the last decade or so, kind of looking at the low tides, and then the percentage of time that you would have 3 feet of depth of water per day above mean low water. And so there's a period of some days as low as 2 hours around low tides where you might not have access with 3 feet of depth of water to up to 5 or 6 hours or so of time during some days around those 2 tide cycles. It was noted that, some boats have a draft that's only 18 inches, or kayaks have 6 inches or so, or a foot. So there's certainly the standard 3 feet, what the Boating Facilities Fund program or SHIP or others would expect to see for an ideal all tides access launch. But you can certainly get away with some less draft for some boats around that. But to get out to the deeper channel, you have to go out about 200 feet. There's a fair amount of silt that occurs in the river out there during the bars coming off the island right across the water from the site. And we would envision that you probably need some level of maintenance dredging possibly every year, every couple of years or so going forward. So there's the initial dredge, and we usually over dredge down a couple of feet while you're out there to make sure you have the right depth. But the articulating mat is like a concrete grid or block system that's tied together with wiring. And they're laid down for embankment stabilization. They're laid down in riverine environments beyond boat launches where logs and other debris and things like that can kind of wash and stick in the mud to create a clean surface if you go for that routine dredging going forward.
So this lays flat in the river?
Yeah, so after you excavate out, you put down this
Okay.
matting, and again, it's hard for a contractor with a crane or to do anything really by hand out there, so it's a large mat they can just drop down. And you have a level surface that you can continue to scrape for future maintenance dredge.
Okay.
And we're not certain, it's a highly regulated environmental area out there, so we caution, even with the higher cost, that it might not be challenging to get permitted as well too. And they would ask you to do an alternatives analysis. They look at the launch across the river in Brunswick. They would understand the town's desire to have, for rescue purposes, things like that. Take all that into consideration. But that would be a next step, would be to talk with them for the detail.
That was the one thing I didn't. Blew me away, $1.4 million, so.
Does Brunswick get bridge?
Don't believe so. It's deeper on the side of the river. Double check on that.
They have some riprap there as well, like on the railroad bridge. Trying to think,
Shoreline, you thinking that?
yeah,
So it's riprap on the shoreline, even just for the launch that we designed, we usually recommend like a scour pad, basically 10 feet beyond the end of the ramp, the precast point ramp thing. But to go out there an extra couple hundred feet, just so we get to deeper water and the river channel, would recommend something like that matting. You don't have to do it, but I think it'd be a bit challenging to maintain the channel.
you can present the. Yes, I have a bunch of questions, but I will wait until after you're done.
Hey, go ahead, yeah, whatever order you guys would like. Everyone can see this and it's needed. So the initial appendix to the report is talking about those planning level cost estimates. And again, we have provided a 30% contingency to this level of design. Once you get a more detailed topographic survey and bathymetric survey out of the river, you can refine some of those costs in areas where there may be freshwater wetlands upland that we may need to work around parking and so on. And then, it's a substantial amount of money, and we'd be applying for grants to fund it. So we try and at least initially estimate a couple of years out with our costs, but beyond that, we recommend just start considering escalation prices in the future. It does take 5 years from now. So first page in your cost estimate is for the boating facility infrastructure on the Topsham Sewer District property. It's for the launch itself. It's for some stormwater improvements, and we talked about things like gating, a gate to control access off the Pine Drive. A lot of your site amenities, if you have picnic tables or things like that, or boat racks down there. The turnaround and that kind of turning lane to circulate around and back and boat down the ramp. Is a bid alternate versus the hammerhead turnaround we showed previously. And then those additional 10 parking spaces are also bid alternate. So that's really one phase of the work, whether it's off Pinewood Drive or whether it's through a new access off Forside Road. It's for the boat ramp and parking right there on site. Second piece is the cost of that access drive from Forside Road. Some of it is a new access drive, and then some of it's just widening and paving and improving the existing existing gravel driveway that's back out to the ball fields near the river. And then we looked at those costs that we just talked about, associated with and broken out separately for the initial dredge and for potential maintenance dredge going forward, costs going forward. We bumped them up since last time. It was a 10% contingency, but should have been a 30% contingency for this level of study. Those dredge numbers there, they are a big number. They are what we've seen for recent projects, for big projects in the there's some projects in some other lakes. It's pretty comparable to what we've seen for prices in the last couple of years. And then the second appendix are the drawings. You guys have the chance to review those. Have not substantially changed with the exception of showing there is no overview of the plan in the boat launch, the parking on the Topsham Sewer District property, and access road from Forsyth Road over the town's rec field facilities property. This plan is updated a little bit here. Showing up on the screen. We have 5 parking spaces as part of our initial design assessment, and then if you were to add 10, it'd be comparable to adding 2 more of that equipment space. There is a gully just beyond to the east, I guess northeast, a little bit of the parking there that cuts across the Topsham Sewer District site. You can cite an additional 5 spaces or so across the way there. Or down kind of close to the river, just to the east of the wastewater pump station. The grade kind of goes uphill, so it might be a little challenging working with that grade going back up towards the solution site. If they go further to the Topsham Sewer District properties. The ramp, we have costs for doubling the width of the ramp or just having a single lane width. Understanding the feedback from last time is that we're looking at this probably single one lane at this point. You know, in the future, if demand increases, you could certainly add that in. It wouldn't prohibit you doing that. Be more cost effective as one big project. That's sort of something we could have in the future. And then this profile sheet shows some of the technical design standards that we adhere to for designing boat ramps. There's a 12 to 15% grade that we try and follow for the ramp itself. And then again, as best we can, we try to get 3 feet of depth at mean level water, in this case, to match that existing grade of the riverbed. And it extends about 200 feet out from the shore. We get down to mean level water with the ramp. That is it for the drawings. And at that point, I think, plus, Julie have additional questions for me. So, welcome to the council.
You good?
Go ahead.
Can I speak?
Your show.
All right, sweet. So, the design is fantastic. I think the travel direction would screw a lot of people up. But people can adapt, I suppose.
Or the loop.
Well, just you're driving on the left side to get down there, and on the right side to get back. Would be, but I understand why, because for some people really.
Yes.
So cost was obviously jaw dropping. With that said, I looked through a number of those grants that you suggested. So LWCF, which you pay for half the cost.
We're 500,000. I think they might even be up to 6. So that's based on we're working on a grant for Winthrop with Norcross. We did their town beach and ramp. So the boat launch there was funded through the boating facilities fund, which is state gas tax funded. They get a few $100,000 a year. That used to go a long way for boat launches. You can fund 4 or so of them at least, or hand carried ones like we put in ahead of Tide Park, which the Topsham, which is a combination of WCF and boating facilities funds. The nice thing, if you can double that up, and Brunswick's actually doing it with a project right now that we're on since point boat launch, is the Obviously, these funds are state funds, which then can be used as part of your match for federal funds through Maine water conservation funds. So that was a strategy if you combine both of those, that you might get in that $600,000. So.
So ship dropped their total. Because it used to be almost limitless when I was on that review committee, now it's $50,000. Is that correct? Yeah.
Shore and Harbor planning grants are, SHIP Maine DOT funds are a little bit higher to the $500,000.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I think Brunswick, I think was 175 and SHIP is 175, largely for their Simpson Point project. And that's a 50-50 match where some of them are, the budget says funds are 25-75. Happy to talk.
Yeah, I'm just trying to,
After this report.
the rest of the board is aware that there's a way to knock this crazy cost down. The HMA grant with submerged lands, I think that's only 10 grand, but that would still chip away some of those floats, right?
Yeah, so some of that are like the GoPF funding, you have to get a little creative. I mean, they're focused on resiliency and climate change, or again, another round of what's the program or grant and shore and harbor, additional shore and harbor planning money, or coastal communities grants to advance design and survey, pay for permitting, but that's not a huge cost. So there's some ways you can design some of this, pay for maybe the design and survey and get that chunk, 10% or so from install costs out of the maybe, and then you just go out to those other ones for extra.
So when I was adding everything up, if we stuck with this cost, we could potentially knock this down to around $1 million, 900K. That would still be on the table. I asked Angela Twitchell from BPLT to look into other funding devices that she might be aware of. Derek just walked out of the room, unfortunately, but Mark, do you know, is all the property that we're talking about owned by the town, or is there a piece that's owned by the water or the sewer district?
I think some of it's on the sewer, on the ground, yeah.
Most of where the boat launch is, the parking is cost of sewer district.
So we might be able to get some kind of covenant on that, which would then give us some additional funding as well, possibly. So I guess my thought moving forward, when the appropriate, and tell me if I'm wrong here, would be to do an RFI just to see what, if anyone, there may be interest here, but just to see exactly what people would come in at. Wouldn't commit us to anything, and we can just get an idea for exactly how much it's going to cost on the market. Dredging. The Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission bought their own dredge like 4 or 5 years ago, right, or something like that. It's like a municipal dredge that Wells and Kennebunk and a couple of other towns down there use to reef, because their beaches are constantly washing away, but.
Yeah, there's only one vessel, I believe, for the East Coast.
Right.
So
Ridiculous, yeah, so my thought there was, I mean, they're probably still trying to pay that thing off, so I mean, that's, another route to go, or instead of using somebody like, Bubro or whoever does the dredging now, I mean, might be reaching out to the SFPC.
Chesterfield or Proctor.
Yeah, right, yeah, trying to figure out, like, if we might be able to use that for a cheaper cost.
I do a lot of resiliency planning work for them, so not myself, person in their office, so you ask them.
Cool. So that might bring annual cost down too, and I did reach out to Stan Tech at one point a while back, and asked them about an initial dredge investigation, which would include the bathymetry, the estimates about sediment removal, and seals and stuff, and they came in around 29 grand. This is super informal, so I'm sure it'll be different. But that could be covered by short harbor planning pretty easily, unless GI did it as well, which.
We often work with other folks like them. There's some level of sampling we will do. But not to this scale, this extensive. And a lot of it, yeah, for the Maine Fire Environmental Protection, Army Corps, they have different standards for testing of materials. You do need to have either an offshore campsite, or you need to have an upland site that's approved to handle the dredge material, depending on what's in it. There's a historic dam there, and just upstream, and could be a lot of contaminants in it, or it could be very clean material that you want them to do that. Just
It's all sawdust under like maybe 5 inches of mud, something like that.
not too many heavy metals.
That's all I got, but I guess my suggestion going forward, if we're thinking about next steps, would be an RFI or something to that effect, and then have planning staff look into funding and maybe give us an idea as to what options are out there. Travis, your contract is done, right?
Pretty much we'll wrap this up with the report that kind of summarizes the discussions we've had and the environmental regulation, next steps for permitting, so.
So you still have some capacity that maybe if Julie had to pick something off you.
Absolutely, and I've been here a long time, and don't go away, so please keep calling. We've had several conversations after projects with the town. It's more valuable to us to help you guys with just give you a nice plan and call it good. So I would really like to see the projects constructed as well. And we just sent out lunch agreements for the Maine Coastal Program where funds. You know, and pretty much all the ones that help you guys out construction as well. Please reach out and have questions about that.
Okay.
I got one more thing, Marie.
Sure.
Last thing. Just from my own perspective, and Dave has already ranted about this before, but as it is now, as it stands, we don't really have any control in our coastal environment, period, because we don't have a harbor ordinance. In order to get a harbor ordinance, we need some kind of access like this. Right now, as Travis alluded to, the Army Corps calls all the shots. So they could allow whatever to go out there, provided they get through a permitting process, and I mean, we'd have some say in it, but not like we would if we had a harbor ordinance that specifically outlined exactly what could and could not happen in our coastal environment. So we're getting a lot more people in this area. As everybody knows, it's growing very quickly, and it might not be a bad idea to start thinking about that now before things start happening in that zone. My closing thoughts. Marie, go right ahead.
I'm just, clarification. All this is contingent on if you can get the permits, do it.
Yes, so as designed without the dredge, the permitting is pretty straightforward. Assuming that we didn't do the environmental study in the upland area, if there are vernal pools or things like that, you need to work around those, but from a feasibility standpoint, the boat launch as designed just to get down to the mean level water right off the shore is something that we would expect to be permitted. The dredging that far out, again, they would ask for a fairly extensive alternatives analysis if you had somebody like Stantec and all to do more detailed assessment of what's out there. That would go a long ways towards answering these questions. You can have a pre-application meeting. We did talk about that, our scope, and we can still facilitate a call or conversation with Army Corps or DEP. At this level, they often say we want to see more details, but I guess they can give you a sense of, no way we wouldn't want that. Or yes, sir, move forward, but they wouldn't guarantee permanent approval at this stage.
Is there a cost for this permit? Obviously.
Yes.
Is that in this here?
The environmental kind of study and permitting effort costs are in there. Costs associated with handling of the dredge material, things like that, and it are factored in to the cost for cubic yards for dredging in there. The cost for the permit applications, it's straightforward, just the ramp, are fairly minor. We're talking less than $1,000. The cost for permitting for the dredges, okay, we'll get into that a little bit further detail, but for substantial. Does that answer that question?
My question is, what is the maintenance per year of, what is the cost of maintenance per year for a facility like this? Because if you have to dredge every year, then you have to do other things.
6%. So upland maintenance, the launches themselves for their precast ramp, you could get some floating debris and stuff like that that washes up on it periodically. So to the extent they have somebody about the works go down, clear the launch, that's pretty minimal. The dredge would really be the big maintenance dredge, would be the bigger piece.
And how much I saw dredging on here per year?
Yeah, so it is, so we're estimating about 170,000
Per year, maybe.
per year for that.
Okay.
That's what that 30% contingency
Right.
is, so as you know more about what you're allowed to do, that could come down, it's probably gonna be in the ballpark of $100,000. Some of that is based on availability of equipment, reach out to us and you can see that's. But if you're tied to independent contractors, and these folks are, based on their availability lately. This cost can be minimal or low price. The upland maintenance is pretty minimal mowing,
The,
I don't have to plow it in the winter.
what do you think other issues the environmental people in Augusta would have? Because there's just to build up in the mall, there was all kinds of huge fees for people to build up in there. So now we're talking waterways and if there's certain growth there and stuff, I'm sure you studied that already, right?
As far as the permittability of the boat ramp, it's unfortunately public boat ramps are permit by rule through the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, which is a fairly expedited process.
Okay.
It's one of the things they support. Fairly streamlined position. Army Corps, as long as it's not going to impact the federally navigable waters in a negative way, and that's point, you guys have a harbor management plan, that would be helpful. But they're generally supportive of these projects as well.
We'd be removing a lot of tires for the river, so it should be a plus, I think. Especially not the thing there.
So I don't see too many regulatory hurdles, but just the boat launching and the dredge piece, you get maybe some pushback on that. And so, why can't, that's a long ways to go. And there's the public benefit versus using other ramps nearby.
Thank you.
Travis, I would ask you a couple questions. Sure. What's the depth of the tide right now at the boat ramp where you'd be actually launching?
It's negative 5.3 feet, I believe. Again, there's a tidal gauge station or substation, and they're all connected to Portland. That's pretty close by in the reverse. So you think the numbers are accurate. There's another thing I should mention. Part of the original scope was to coordinate with Maine Geological Survey on their thoughts on tidal gauge. So their response back was that they don't offer tidal gauges necessarily at this point. They do think it's a good idea. And if the town did want to have more localized access to determining what tide is near this site, we work with somebody like the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Lisa Linsky recommended Maine Geological Survey to reach out to them if the town is interested in installing a tidal gauge.
Can you repeat what you said earlier in the update? 3 feet of water, what's this in the end dredge? Mentioned 3 feet of water at the end of the boat ramp. On average, how much time are we seeing that during the tide cycle?
So it would be inaccessible at water levels below that for about 5 hours a day, on average, around 2 tide cycles.
That includes those cycles.
So
We probably average about 4 hours.
18-ish, 19 hours a day, you can probably.
Don't give me a reason to stay out longer.
So I just want to be clear, so on each tide cycle, you're probably getting about 4 hours of boat use.
Correct,
3 feet.
yeah, within the 6, well. This, I would say it's longer than that, it's double that, just because.
I'm just thinking on each side of high tide.
Yeah, so in each side of high tide, you have about 4 hours, 4.5, so yeah, closer to 9. Around the high tide cycle.
Of 3 feet or more.
Okay, yeah, spell those facts out that it's not accessible at all tides on 24/7, but. You know, the cost to potentially get it to that fully accessible boat standard
So
versus having it partially inaccessible for 4 or 5 hours or so a day in total. It's closer to 5.
So to do the access, to do the parking spots, to do the design that the board had kind of suggested. Everything outside of the dredging is, I mean, maybe I'm just wrong, shy of $1 million.
Yes, it is under $1 million, and depending on the alternates and which you want. If you add that additional parking spaces, then it's still just under $1 million, or so it's closer to 750,000 or so.
Thank you.
And the single lane launch, so there's some numbers in there for a double lane. And then there's a deduct for if you just go with the hammerhead turn around versus the clockwise circle going left, up to right, and the wrong direction. It's kind of down, but it's the site, so.
There's no adjusting.
If you put that, the launch is just that much further in towards the left flat side, or towards the fourth side road. We try to maximize getting as far out into deeper waters we could.
What do you think is the probability of getting a lot of grants for this to bring it down to? Is the total figure, 300,000, 300, is it 3 million?
With the dredging,
Right,
yes,
okay. What
it's
is
closer
the
about,
probability of getting enough grants to
it's closer to.
bring that down to $1 million?
Yeah, so that's the dredge is about 3 million, and then the boat ramp is 750,000 or so.
Yeah.
That is a little bit more challenging with the grant programs that we've mentioned. You can apply for some of them in subsequent years, so you can get that $500,000 ship money, sometimes doubled over 2-year cycle. We're doing that in Cape Porpoise and kind of on board right now. But the funding, there's the new Jobs and Infrastructure Act funds. There were special earmarks, the congressional earmarks there for a little while, and I didn't have the extent, those are still available. But those are the bigger programs. And something like this is that once you start getting $1 million plus. So it's been challenging.
So I know SHIP's got a new program, relatively new program manager, but when I was serving on the review committee for that grant program, giving the town their first public access grant was always bump them up right to the top of the priority list. And this would be our first public access grant, because they like to be able to say, we helped this town or X town get this infrastructure grant. So I think they don't have a review committee anymore, I don't think, but that was always something that rose to the top whenever we were examining the proposal.
And Chris Mayo is in charge of it now. He's
Still.
our master, yeah.
Same thing, that makes sense.
Fast, and I won't, I would like to say there's reasonably adequate funding for the amount of applications that come in. It could be, we've had good fortune projects that I've worked on, but most of them, say at least throughout my career, I've gotten funding. If they didn't get funding for that first round, they're in the queue for it a whole year. So once you apply once, it's not a big effort to go through that year.
What, and from, probably haven't pursued any other areas, and I don't know what, but would like this area because it's easier access or public, it's easier, public, there's no other place that would be where the tide is more consistent in Topsham.
Well, the only other spot is down in Muddy River Bridge, and IFW actually bought all that land around there, and the intent, I think, to originally put a ramp in. They never did.
We raised that question, we're starting working on this project a little bit too, and brought them last input for Julie, and we did the one I was at Wright Pierce, we worked on the lower Goodrich water access study as well too, and we did just looking for up there, and I think the town explored down the Green Street neighborhood, looking at that site as well, and there's some challenges there, but it limited right away in access. So unfortunately, there are actually more promising.
The Green Street one was a big drop off, was a lot, I remember that.
Yes, the town has done several, studies or conversations and looked at other locations. Asked us to focus really on this site. It's the best one available.
So I've got a question to the board and then as well a comment. What is it? I was a little surprised last time that there was several board members immediately had no interest in an access from Island Drive. It was essentially immediately, everyone was against it, which I was a little surprised by to take it off the table that quick. No way, we're not doing that. What's the reasoning to not utilize a public roadway into this?
That's a good question, so I did, the 750,000 was.
Well, that's why-
Access on mine would buy the additional 300,000.
That's what I was asking, because I got a feeling the last time there was a talk about, there was several that were no way in heck, we don't want to go on Pinewood Drive except for emergency access.
I never got that impression.
You were one of them.
Well, I was not opposed to it, so that was not my words. My words was I was concerned the neighborhood and you just felt that, so that was my biggest concern. In traffic and things like that, and you said it's gated, it's everything else, so, you know.
No, but I'm asking, why wouldn't we not gate it, make that the main entrance from Pinewood Drive?
I'm not saying we shouldn't, or should.
Would it be cheaper?
Yes.
$300,000 less. So we did, we would always recommend, and the town does, so it engages the public when appropriate. So initially, this study was just to kind of see if it was feasible before you would have that next step.
Yeah.
So now that we've seen some numbers and price comparisons, we would certainly encourage you to have no public input on that issue as well. But you do have the accessibility, public access through that neighborhood currently.
So then my next comment to the board, before we would move on, Matt, to the request. I mean, I'm one that pushed for all access, and I don't find it to be feasible, and especially with the ongoing cost of dredging so much. So where's the board? But I also have zero interest in putting in just a hand carry rate. Where's the whole dredging thing, the 200 feet out? Certainly changed my mind from what I was envisioning quickly.
We'd have some issues with sturgeon for sure.
Yeah, I mean, how does the rest of the board, do we even want to pursue the 200-foot direction here? With a 3.3, well, some of that probably would go down, some of them.
It is something you could do in the future, be extending the ramp a little bit, once you did it at the bottom, going down, so you get 3 feet more depth, but that is something that you can consider.
Are you saying if you extended that 200 feet, you wouldn't have to dredge then?
Right.
You would dredge initially to get, so you'd have to dredge 200 feet to get out to the depth that's needed further out in the river.
And you'd still have to do it annually.
Yeah, you would not be allowed to basically raise the ramp up to about a 2% grade, and it wouldn't be steep enough to get a boat off it, unfortunately, at the end, but or to fill level and then do a steeper ramp at the end. I don't think the regulatory folks are basically allowed, in Army Corps doesn't allow you to fill out that they would have a lot of those, so that would be the way to avoid dredge, but that'd be a lot of fill and that would cost as well.
I think Travis's point though is well taken. I mean, rather than go that route of dredging, we could potentially add something in the future if the need and desire is there. But if we were to go with just the ramp now and retain 18 hours of access versus 44, we'd be able to gauge how popular it is, how much it's used, and if people want to go down the road of paying $136,000 a year every year for maintenance, and that's something we could talk about in the future. But I think to answer your question, I'm fine with 18 hours a day. I think that makes a lot of sense, and especially considering how easily permanent something like that would be. And that it drops almost $3 million off the total cost.
Well,
Yeah.
hey, realistically, do we have any estimate as to what the usage would be year one? In terms of number of vehicles that would be down there at one time?
Nothing firm, no, that it's size based on comparable size of a facility nearby in Brunswick or other comparable municipal sites around the state. But that is hard to gauge the interest level. If you build it, will they come? Yeah, what is it's and marinas are a little bit, more.
So you could take a sort of staggered approach to this if you wanted to.
Same thing with, starting with the 5 boat trailer spaces, and go right to for example, or waiting to see if we want some little public restroom facility down there, or picnic tables and boat racks, and those are smaller costs. So you can certainly build over time. That's what you did with Head of Tide Park as well, too. We did the downstream launch, and built some of the structures, and just recently did an upstream launch, so. If you do get momentum, a good public momentum launch times around that type of strategy.
My car will be there once a weekend, so you can add that one to your account.
I'll answer your question, Dave. I like the idea of the boat ramp being in Thompson. I do not like the idea of the costs and the maintenance easier. So to modify it, after we saw the modifying figures to reduce it. And then later on in years, if you want to start building a fund or whatever to expand it, might be more logical. This is a lot of money. And for only to use it so many hours of the day because of the tide, I think.
The funding programs to that point about maintenance, I think they will allow you to charge a reasonable boating fee and report, and that's a few bucks from residents and a little bit more for out of state and so far. For example, like your armor charges $20 for a boat launch.
So
So
pay 30 in Belfast.
it varies, but you can, yeah, you are allowed with those state and federal funded programs to support construction, you can charge standard boat access fees.
With that modification, will that minimize the size of the boats able to utilize it? Would it end up being just carry on?
For which modification?
You would still have, you could still have smaller motor boats if we didn't dredge out 200 feet.
Right.
Depending on the point of the tide, and you wouldn't get very large.
Yeah, Boston Whaler or a small kind of aluminum Chris crab type boat or something like that, but might get 18 inches of draft or so. It's hard to tell between the variety of boats out there. So in the industry standards, it's just 103 feet of depth for bottom to launch. But you're right, and that's still that 18 or 19 hours a day under that standard, and you might get a little bit more access.
Yeah, the access.
For 18-inch
size. With modification.
Repeated drafts can handle pretty much any size boat you expect to have launch.
Like a 21 footer.
Have gill boats.
Don't put your sailboat in there. Probably not a good idea.
So do we want to? And Travis is done unless we ask him to, well, he's given us everything. He's given us piecemeal. If we want this, we can do this. We can come and go.
Again, I'll give you a report with some narrative of
Right.
what we're talking about. So you have that in the background.
So do we want to wait for the report, put an agenda item, see where we go with it? And then before we say, let's run out.
Yes.
So let's see, that, we'll get it on this summer. Well,
Yeah, I should be able to complete that by the end of this month.
oh, okay. We'll do that. Yeah, we can start piecemealing and making multiple decisions of what we request. Yeah. Good. All right.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you. Great report. Or great design.
We did great.
Now we can jump to new business. 2358, consideration and appropriate action on a letter of support from the select board and the energy committee applying for a community action grant to complete a climate action plan update. Ooh, Julie?
Hey there. Topsham's Energy Committee is in the process of completing a community resilience partnership community action grant application for an update to the 2010 climate action plan. Currently 13 years old, one of the recommendations from Sustainable Topsham, the group that drafted the plan, was to review and update it every 5 years, which sounds ambitious, but the state of Maine has a 4-year plan.
Coincides with elections.
The update will provide a framework for the town and its residents to understand the inherent risks of climate change and the ways in which the town and its residents can take action to adapt and mitigate those risks. The 2010 Climate Action Plan focuses on mitigation and greenhouse gas reduction strategies based on a 2008 baseline. The Climate Action Plan update, which we anticipate would finish in 2025, will adopt strategies from Maine Won't Wait, the state's 4-year climate action plan, and will focus on resiliency, include a vulnerability assessment and greenhouse gas inventory. The plan will identify public and private infrastructure that's at risk and highlight underserved areas. The committee will emphasize public engagement, specifically targeting vulnerable populations. And for example, those that live on floodplains or areas that are prone to severe storms, Pleasant Point Road comes to mind. Or those that live in poverty might be less able to prepare for or respond to weather events. The Energy Committee intends to complete the Climate Action Plan update solely with community action grant funds. There is no cost share requirement for communities that are implementing the climate and energy priorities that are listed in the state's community action inventory. The Mid-Coast Council of Governments has offered their support with community outreach, consultant contracting, and data collection. And the chosen consultant would lead facilitated discussions about infrastructure, assets, and communities most vulnerable to climate change, and collect data on which aspects of climate change are most likely to affect those assets and communities. So the committee requests a letter from the select board as a show of support for obtaining these grant funds for the project. And I've included a draft letter of support that the select board can use. Thank you.
Julie, can you, so here's where I don't understand. Is we are looking to update the climate action plan, but we're already in this letter telling what it's going to be in, what's going to be in there. We are going to adopt the strategies of Maine Won't Wait. This focus on recycling without even having the whole idea of this is about having a plan specific to Topsham, right? But we're already talking right off the bat in our request. We are going to adopt this. We are going to do these things. How is that? And then you had said something else towards the end, and I should have paid attention. What line? Because I wanted you to reread it to me, but it just seems as though if we're going to look to have a plan for Topsham, how is it that we immediately say this is what's going to be in it? And
So we don't really know what
if
that,
that's the case, why don't we just photocopy something, stamp Topsham's thing on it, and save everyone time?
we don't really know what the outcomes are going to be, but we know the areas that we want to look at, looking at vulnerable populations and vulnerable infrastructure, and try to figure out what those things are, so we can identify those and figure out ways to implement strategies to protect those things and provide resiliency.
The Climate Action Plan has a number of different sections in it. There's a lot of junk, there's a lot of lip service, and there's a bunch of stuff in there that no state agency will ever even attempt to accomplish. But there's also some decent information in there about what Julie touched on in terms of critical infrastructure. And you said that MCOG will be doing data collection for this, which is a huge boom for this, especially when you're talking about coastal areas and flooding, and trying to figure out exactly what types of impact we might see in 10, 20 years based on certain scenarios. So I think, to Julie's point, there's a bunch of headings in there that we probably won't even pay attention to, but based on what Julie's described, would be focusing on when we take those headings and then tailoring them specifically for Tom. Is that fair?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah, because I don't believe that certain people will allow that to happen. I believe Some will see the gibberish, which we all can agree is foolish. We need to get down to the nuts and bolts. Some will hold it up and say, here Topsham has adopted this plan, 2045 plan, whatever it is. And it's all on the table, right? And those are the types of things that always drive me nuts. If we need a Topsham climate action plan, yep. But just to throw in everybody else's stuff, that's become the hot button issue. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate it. What you just said, Matt, yep, I'm all in. When I see will adopt strategies that Maine won't wait, I'm like, uh-oh. And I don't know how to get people to understand. Maybe, I don't know. The gibberish it hurts because people look at the gibberish and they start to be like, oh, I don't want any part of this. Instead of looking at, all right, we're gonna look at this coastline, we're gonna look at what this means in Topsham. That's the only thing that worries me when we do something like this. It's gotta have. And granted, we still can get it developed and maybe we can push that we really care about the important stuff. Keep your, you know, stuff that makes certain people happy, keep it out of our report, but that's my take.
To follow up on what you said, Dave, I agree with the gibberish, and I think it would be beneficial if you said, this is our intent to look at this and look at that and to see where things are at, instead of saying, we are going to do this and we are going to do that, and we are more of an outline of what your intent and what your facts are going to be when you bring it back.
So how does this work? We give approval tonight. How does our feedback?
Your support letter would go into the grant application, which is due on the 7th.
Which in the grant letter doesn't mention all the gibberish stuff. It doesn't mention the Maine won't wait or whatever it is. It talks specifically about Topsham. So it's important that I would like to make sure everyone understands when this starts getting worked on, we're interested in the important stuff to Topsham. You know, just what's in the letter here, talking about the flooding and the outages and, you know, how is it going to affect Topsham? None. To me, I have zero interest in the gibberish. I think it's a complete waste of time, and I think it drives people away from looking at the important stuff. Thanks for the word gibberish.
So it's probably worth it.
Yeah, because
Short and sweet.
yeah, you do give us the important stuff. I hate when someone will be able to take things that don't mean anything and really start to try to push it within town.
Take 5 sports and turn it into 50.
Yeah. But as it gets worked, I really hope that sentiment is acknowledged, that do what's important for Topsham.
I still think there's some additional checking periods too, right? We've got to vote to accept
Right.
funding if we get it, right? So I mean, there's gonna be an opportunity to look at this. This is just a support letter.
Yeah, but even before, you know, we accept the money, then they bring back a finished product. I hope before the finished product, we can eliminate. That's what I'm saying. You know, let's get somewhere, let's make sure the important stuff is dealt with. Is my take. Someone else might think everything's important.
And the grant application, like the gibberish, that's kind of important to the grant application. That's what they want to see, that we're addressing these certain strategies.
That was the line I was looking you to go back to. Yep. Anyone else? Questions? My rant's over.
Yeah, I just want to be upfront about my jadedness here. I mean, clearly, I'm a huge believer in climate change. I study this stuff for my job. So when I see stuff like this, that's proposing to rip up a massive public transportation system, that would take how many cars off the road? And it goes against everything that the state would focus on in terms of electrification. Children. So there's my jadedness right there. Done.
Glad to share something good. So we need a motion, what exactly, make a motion to, do we want the letter of support just me? It's all written as we, and then it's got my name. How does the rest of the board feel about it? Does anyone care?
Not really.
Okay. So I'm on the hook, thanks.
We care about that.
Yeah.
It would still be funny to keep we in there, just as we decided.
It is, isn't
Like
it?
you're talking about. Multiple person.
Dave, that was-
We can- We'll leave that for you, which I have that list, much more.
Thank you. I want them all to get out, so I'm just.
Yeah. Awesome. Select board.
I will make a motion that we sign a letter of support for the Energy Committee to apply for a community action grant to complete a climate action plan update.
Second.
Motion seconded. All those in favor, unanimous. Thank you, Julie. Bad job grabbing that thing tonight. All right, so we are on to 2359, consideration and appropriate action on annual appointments. All right, so we had interviews tonight, and everyone recalls during the interview, one of the things I well, it's killing me because I gotta keep scrolling back. Sorry, 2359 is, so it's Tom Lister as coach, Chief McLaughlin as EMD Director / Civil Emergency, Chris McLaughlin, Fire Warden / Health Officer, Dennis Cox, Road Commissioner, Linda Dumont, Registrar of Voters, Brian Batchelder, Weights and Measures. Any questions?
Read the motion.
All right, I made the motion that we appoint all of those individuals and
Who seconded it? Thank you.
thank you. All those in favor? All right, so this next one, 2360, consideration and appropriate action on reappointments to various boards and committees. So tonight, as you recall, we had interviews, but during the interview, we have a number of individuals, 1, 2, 3, 4, going to the planning board, which is an overwhelming amount of people all in 1 year. So Scott Libby has stepped forward, said that he would look to reappoint for a 2-year position so that we can kind of spread out when we're appointing people, so we don't have a mind drain all at one time. So the positions are John Hodge to TDI, Brian Robinson to TDI, Scott Libby, you do a 2-year to planning board, Lawrence Brand to planning board, Don Span planning board, Ronnie Bisson planning board, Chris Leclerc sewer district, John Graham historic district, Gordon Donnelly Board of Appeals, Michael Nelson Board of Appeals, Gordon Donnelly once again Assessment Review Committee, Yvette Meunier, Brenda Thompson Water District, Ralph Williams History Committee, Victor Langelo Conservation Commission. I make a motion that we appoint all of those individuals, including Scott Libby, though, for a 2-year term.
Second.
Motion seconded, all those in favor, unanimous. 2361, consideration any appropriate action on appointments to the planning board and finance committee. Just as we talked earlier, we interviewed for planning tonight. We would look to make this individual a 2-year appointment, so to continue that staggering. And then we would do the finance committee as the 3-year. So because it's different times, well, we have to have one motion because it's one agenda item. So I will make a motion that we appoint Kimberly Mondonado to the finance committee for a 3-year term. And I would make a motion that we appoint Timothy Dunham to the planning board for a 2-year term.
Second.
Motion seconded, all those in favor? Unanimous. 2362, consideration and appropriate action to accept deeds and easements offered by Market Basket in reference to the traffic circle and authorize the town manager to execute the agreements on behalf of the. Hey, Mark.
Good evening. So at the last meeting, I kind of outlined the documents we were working on with Market Basket's representatives. We got drafts from Market Basket in the meantime. Our attorneys looked at them and he's approved deeds from Market Basket as well as the owners of the property across the street that would allow us to widen the road. And a temporary construction easement on the property across the street to give us room to build the wide road. And then we've also got agreements to maintain, actually, they're gonna be doing the maintaining, but we can flow Topsham Mall Road water onto some retention ponds that are gonna be on the Market Basket property. And then we've got an agreement that basically says they're gonna build the road in accordance with their plans. They're gonna give us an approved copy of the plan when it's done, so that we know exactly what's where. We're gonna have, Julie was working the other day with meetings where we're talking about, we're having our own engineers. It's gonna make sure that the road's built to specs, it's got the right depth of pavement and everything like that. And then the last agreement is one that allows Market Basket to maintain flowers and on the middle of traffic island, and they're gonna build a water line to it. We'll actually own the line, but they're gonna be the ones responsible to maintain it, and they're gonna pay for the water that's gonna water the flowers. So I'm happy to talk in more detail if you'd like, but if you approve it tonight, then town manager would sign them tomorrow. We'll send them off to Market Basket. They'll sign them and quickly get moving on construction.
Does anyone have any questions? How this is? So from a big deal to here we are. So. I'm just saying with one agenda item. I'm gonna make one motion, but it's got two parts to it. Does that make sense to everybody? So first motion, my motion, the first part of it is to accept the deeds and easements offered to the town by the Jamula's Market Basket Incorporated, Carolyn Wilson and Alan B. Wilson Trust in connection with Market Basket Traffic Circle and Topsham Mall Road. And additionally, we authorize the town manager to execute on behalf of the town, the roadway construction and access agreement and the landscape maintenance and access license agreement with Demoulas Supermarkets Incorporated. Second. Motion seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Matt, did you?
No, it was nothing serious.
Unanimous. Good thing, Mr. Nothing Serious can take us home.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion seconded, all those in favor. I hope that was because I haven't.